US is operating freedom of navigation. In January 2022, 3 aircraft carriers out of 10 Nimitz class were operating in the Indo-Pacific. US competition with China is still fierce. US demands China to comply with South China Sea arbitration. However, Putin's invasion in Ukraine makes the competition different. How is Biden going to deal with the Indo-Pacific? It's about US and Pacific. According to Walter Mead, U.S. foreign policy is classified in 4 categories: Hamiltonianism, Jeffersonianism, Wilsonianism, and Jacksonianism. It is sorted by realism and rivalism, and interventionism and isolationism. Before colonization of Philippines, U.S. had no interest in the Pacific. U.S. isolated themselves in America, which is called Monroe Doctrine. It is classified as Jeffersonianism. After the independence, U.S. had to concentrate on exploitation of America and make one American market. Vast continent made U.S. able to develop themselves without any foreign market. Even after the colonization of Philippines, U.S. barely killed it. The First World War changed it, but it did not last long. Just after the war, despite Wilson Doctrine and foundation of League of Nations, U.S. returned to isolationism. It is blamed as a cause of Great Depression, but U.S. also solved it by themselves. On 7 December 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor changed all. U.S. should accept their new stature in international relations. Abandoning isolationism, U.S. had done her duty as new hegemonic state. From this moment, U.S. foreign policy was practiced in a mixed way amidst 4 categories. Before the Korean War, U.S. focused on Atlantic. Marshall Plan and NATO competed with common form of Soviet Union. Korean War shifted the focus to the Pacific. Acheson Land Declaration triggered the war, and U.S. noticed the importance of Pacific in competition with communism. Korean Peninsula was the ideology defense line of both U.S. and Soviet Union. For this, U.S. embraced former enemy Japan, and Soviet Union cooperated with China. In 1954, First Taiwan Strait Crisis. In 1958, Second Taiwan Strait Crisis. In 1955, Vietnam War. Consistent conflict in the Pacific made U.S. over-intervene in the ideology conflict. Eventually, Vietnam War trapped America. This shifted U.S. policy in the Pacific. Vietnam War, Cuban Missile Crisis, and Berlin Crisis made U.S. and Soviet Union make settlement. Thanks to this break, though, China emerged as a new strong state in the Pacific. Nixon needed China to besiege Soviet Union. On the other hand, India collaborated with Soviet Union to compete with China. About a decade of though was collapsed for Soviet-Afghan War. After the speech of April Empire by Ronald Reagan, he designed SDI, which is the origin of MD system. It was to neutralize the nuclear capability of Soviet Union. To establish the system, Reagan concentrated on third-party states such as Nicaragua, Afghanistan, Poland, Angola, Cambodia, El Salvador, which was anti-Soviet group. In 1991, U.S. victory got clear. On 17 January 1991, U.S. showed off their power. U.S. attacked Iraq to expel them from Kuwait. On 24 February 1991, U.S. initiated ground war, and just after 100 hours, on 28 February, U.S. ended the war with victory. This is called Gulf War, which is sometimes confused with Iraq invasion. From the end of Cold War, U.S. didn't need to care about Pacific. Unipolar, the only hegemonic state in the world, was certainly United States of America. This made U.S. overstretch. Gulf War, Somalia intervention by George Herbert Bush. Clinton settled his foreign policy based on engagement and enlargement. Kosovo intervention by NATO. DPRK containment. Engagement with Chinese humanitarian issue. New cooperation and secure guideline with Japan. And he planned win-win strategy. Finally, in 2001 and 2003, George W. Bush initiated the war against Afghanistan and Iraq. Even France and Germany, traditional allies, denied the justification of Iraq war. Two-sided war burdened America more than ever. These wars affected 2008 financial crisis. As we've dealt with the crisis, let China become the consolidated strong state G2. Obama made his statement pivot to Asia. Emerging of China demanded US to rebalance the Asia. While America had been trapped in East Asia, China, Russia, and India improved their power. Obama finally gave up the win-win strategy. He settled a new national defense strategy, win-deterrence strategy. Accepting win-win strategy is impossible. He tried to adopt China and existed international system. What he dreamed was peaceful emerging of China. It means US had accepted her policy to control China, so tried to soothe China. Obama wanted to make emerging of China peacefully. On the other hand, he tried to concentrate 60% of US marine pools in the Pacific, improve MD system, and sold weapons worth $5.6 billion to Taiwan. However, as we know, it failed. On 6 July 2018, US-China trade war broke out. China started to emerge as challenging state and tried to recreate international order. China claims they just want to be a regional hegemon in the Indo-Pacific. Yet, being a regional hegemon in the region means controlling 60% of global maritime trade, 2/3 of global GDP, and market of about 4.6 billion population. It made Trump tougher. Trump initiated to balance the Indo-Pacific with power, normalize the trade deficit, and Indo-Pacific initiative. Regardless of his America First slogan, he designed Quad, changed US Pacific Command to US Indo-Pacific Command, and focused China to incorporate into the existing international order. Even he tried to persuade Russia to join beside China. Biden sustains general strategy in the Indo-Pacific. He stated integrate his deterrence as a fundamental of his national security strategy. US had practiced gray zone strategy. It means making a place as a vague zone not to make military conflict. When counterfeit facing it, they can practice strategic gradualism and ambiguity. Sometimes it becomes salami tactic. Touch becomes a tickle, tickle becomes a punch, punch becomes a spike, and spike becomes a stab. Biden wants to prevent any serious armed conflict in the gray zone. Quad plus, triangular cooperation with Korea and Japan, collective security with NATO, alliance improvement, MD system, nuclear deterrence, etc. Biden worries Taiwan could be another Ukraine. However, he also reasons the trade war with China. Invasion of Russia made him rush to deter aid for Russia from China. Also, he needs to gather support by improving national economy. In this circumstance, the value of India is growing each day. Korea is hesitating between Chinese market and US security. Japan is binding to America. Australia is too far from China. America is always trying their best to make India as her ally. Depending on India, America could return to isolationism and be content with regional hegemony. Despite the conflict, I believe there is a low possibility of war between them. First, China doesn't want to have a war against Taiwan. What Xi Jinping is dreaming now is to be a 21st century emperor. He needs to concentrate the power. Existing enemy outside is the best way to do so. Shanghai crisis put him in an unstable position. Now he needs outside enemy more than ever, just like Putin. It is called scapegoat theory in international politics. Second, US is definitely engaging in the war if China initiates the war against Taiwan. Biden is hesitating to engage into the Russo-Ukraine war. It's because Ukraine is not an alliance and US does not want to have a two-sided war again. But when it comes to the Asia, Biden should care Japan, Korea, Taiwan, ASEAN, and even India. Xi knows it. Third and last, Xi cannot believe Putin anymore. Russia's incompetence, Russia's tank, jet, missile, soldiers, they all let down Xi's expectation. China has lots of Russian weapons, about $5.1 billion amount of Russian weapon China has purchased for recent 5 years. Then why are we worrying about the war in the South China Sea region? It's because Xi and Biden want it. That threat, that anxiety, that worry will give them authority to have more power and support. China could sustain its system with growing of economy until 2010s. But now Xi needs something different. China's economic growth is being stalled. He needs something else. Biden is also in the same position. Bush made Saddam Hussein as US's enemy, but Obama defeated the enemy and proposed another enemy, which is called China. Though there is a conflict, there is less possibility of war, but small-sized regional conflict is realistic. We should analyze their intent before worrying it. Anxiety comes from uncertainty. We should not forget this.